As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to host a video rental show on YouTube. On my way back from the taxi cab, I stopped off at my local video store and I rented Goodfellas. You see, being a YouTube video host, to me, it meant being somebody in a neighborhood full of nobodies. It was September 19th, 1990, and the world went out to the movie theaters to catch the brand new Martin Scorsese flick, Goodfellas. This was the very first Martin Scorsese film that I ever saw. To this day, it remains at the top of my list as one of the best films in modern day cinema. That could be considered a wild claim, but hold your judgment until we dive into Goodfellas. We open on the famous scene of Henry Hill, Jimmy Conway, and Tommy DeVito driving down the highway when they hear sound coming from the trunk. This man is still alive, and well, let's just say they took care of him real quick. Flashback, and the year is 1955, and Henry Hill is finding out that the gangster life is the good life. Coming from a working class Italian-American neighborhood, Henry is working for Paulie Cicero at first, doing the odd jobs around the neighborhood. People start to notice his father sure did not appreciate him missing school. You see, Italian gangsters have a way to make sure the mailman's on your side every time. Eventually, Henry is introduced to Jimmy Conway and begins to work with him also. Him and a young Tommy DeVito strike up a friendship and are hustling cigarettes on the side for Jimmy. One day at the factory, Henry gets popped, and first he thought Paulie and Jimmy were going to be really mad at him. Jimmy tells Henry, and I quote, "I'm not mad. I'm proud of you. You took your first pinch like a man, and you learned the two most important things in life. You listen, never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut." Wise words from a wise guy. Now in their early 20s, we see that Henry and Tommy have graduated with the level of crimes that they're doing these days. That night, Henry Hill and Jimmy Conway work it out with someone on the inside as Henry is about to make the most money in his young life. Henry, Tommy, and Jimmy have worked it out to steal part of $1 billion that was coming through a cargo ship at JFK in New York City. They end up with $500,000. Of course, they do the right thing and give Paulie his tribute. During this part of the film, we also get a scene where after being taken advantage of by Tommy, a local restaurant order asks for Paulie's help. Well, now being under the mob, they use and abuse this poor guy and end up lighting the place up for insurance money. Henry is forced into a double date by Tommy and meets Karen Friedman. Initially, he has no interest and no-shows the second date. Karen did not take this well and confronts Henry. Now smitten after seeing her attitude, he takes her out on the town to the Copacabana. After a quick courtship, Karen and Henry tie the knot. Down the road, Henry and Jimmy are at the bar. Seated at the very end is a man named Billy Batts, a made man who was just recently released from prison. Tommy shows up with a date and sees Batts. Well, Tommy's not too happy to see him. He gets into a confrontation real quick and tells Jimmy and Henry to keep him here. By the end of the night, Tommy shows back up and they beat the shit out of Batts. This is real bad. As well, you can't just kill a made man. They take the body out to the woods and bury the fucking thing. Paulie asks some questions, but they all deny knowing what happened. 6 months later comes up and they have to dig the motherfucker up as they find out that the area is being developed. Henry was hooking up with a girl named Janice. He gets her an apartment and basically is living a double life. This continues till Karen has her suspicions and eventually finds out about Janice. And she loses her mind, pulling a gun on Henry. She even goes to Paulie's house. Well, this is where Jimmy and Paulie have to step in and set Henry straight. They insist that Henry go with Jimmy down to Florida to collect some outstanding debts. This one went up Schitt's Creek as Jimmy and Henry are busted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. They show Henry and Paulie in prison together, and really guys, for wise guys, it ain't that bad. The boys are eating good and Henry has a side hustle selling drugs. Eventually, Henry is released and decides that drugs are good for business as he expands his partnership with his boys up in Pittsburgh. Cocaine's a hell of a drug. Paulie lets Henry know that he needs to lay low and should not be getting into any sort of trouble, especially cocaine trouble. Well, what Paulie doesn't know won't hurt him, right? Jimmy puts together a crew in order to pull off the heist of the century. Let's just say they were successful and ended up with $6 million. During a Christmas party, Jimmy is getting paranoid, and for good reason. The lavish gifts some of these momos were buying, plus the getaway truck is found. Jimmy decides it's time to take out every single one of these motherfuckers besides himself, Henry, and Tommy. By the end of the decade, it's announced that Tommy is becoming a made man, waiting to get the call. It's shown that, well, this was all a setup, as after all those years, the Billy Bat murders comes to bite Tommy in the ass. And plus, well, Tommy was kind of an asshole. As he is executed, Jimmy and Henry are not able to retaliate. This is where things get bad for Henry, okay? He's continuing his cocaine business and has a pretty good setup. At this point, he has developed a bad cocaine habit and is becoming very paranoid that he is being followed by the cops. They play the whole day out and Henry is busted by the cops in his own driveway. Knowing that his ass is on the line, Karen is able to bail him out. Henry finds out that Karen had flushed the rest of the stash. This is bad news, as this was all he had to make money. Paulie, to say the least, is very upset with Henry and sends him away with a little over $3,000. We suspect that both Karen and Henry's lives are on the line. We see that Jimmy is secretly thinking that Henry is going to rat him out to the cops. He asks Henry to put a hit out on somebody down in Florida. Henry knows this is it and becomes an FBI informant as he is enrolled into the witness protection program. Jimmy and Paulie are arrested and tried. Henry's testimony puts the two away for decades to come. Henry, at the end of the film, describes the rest of his life as being condemned to be a boring, average schnook. Goodfellas, like I said at the top of the episode, is one of my favorite films of all time. You get Martin Scorsese directing Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, and Joe Pesci all in the same movie. How is this not expected to be considered a legit masterpiece? I'm sorry, but for gangster films, this one does it for me every single time. From the opening line before the credits, I always wanted to be a gangster. And then Rags to Riches pops on. This sequence gives me goosebumps every single time. Now, I know there will be more gangster films that we review here on Video Rental Chaos. But the magic and the atmosphere that Goodfellas produces puts you in a time machine to a different place in America. A time where family was family. People looked out for one another. So until next time, I'll see you at the video store.